Yeah, I think all of this is like basically, can I take my mask off? Like, can I make a mistake and be late and be loved still? Can I tell something that I'm ashamed of and still be loved? Can I be loud and annoying and still be loved? Can I not wear makeup and still be loved? Like all of those things, like, can I take the mask off?
Right. Not wear the perfect outfit.
Right.
Like still.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that seems like, I mean, that's a recipe for any good relationship.
Do you remember what it feels like to be comfortable in your own skin? Not just confident, but also pain-free, relaxed, healthy, and carefree. Think about the most robust version of your own childhood body. This is what lifeiness feels like, a joyful spirit and a vibrant physical state of being. I'm your guide, Professor Sarah, storyteller, teacher, and wellness enthusiast. Reach into the vitality of your own girlhood to supercharge your grown-up life.
Today we're talking about girlfriendship. Specifically, we're going to talk to one of my favorite people in all of the whole wide world, Meghan Vickers. But before we get to the interview, I want to give you a little background about why girlfriendship is so vital to lifeiness. So you've probably heard some of these studies on the science of happiness. It turns out that more than fame or wealth or even physical health, the happiest people on the planet have strong networks, good friendships, right? They have support from their families and their communities. It seems to be a key player for sure. And on a podcast called Lifeiness, it's a top priority. So we'll have other episodes about relationships. But what does it have to do with positive embodiment, which is also a key player of the show? Well, embodiment influences how we feel about ourselves, how we express ourselves, and how we navigate social expectations. To me, friendship is a crucial aspect of female embodiment and girlhood. When we're young, our friendships help us form a sense of identity and belonging. They shape our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. As we get older, our friendships become even more important for our mental and emotional well-being. They provide us that network, that net of support and empathy and validation. And our friendships can even influence our self-esteem, our body image, and our understanding of our potential. So before I introduce Meghan, let me just give you a very quick background of my own girlhood friends. When I was 4 years old, I met my very first bestie. Her name was Kira Sheedy. And when I think back on her spirit as a little girl, I realize she was the first person outside the sphere of my family who ever loved me. It may sound silly since little kid friendships arise mostly out of circumstance, but I really felt chosen by her. Everyone loved her, but she wanted me, of all the little girls in our church group and kindergarten class, to be her very best friend. I was always a little young for my grade, and Kira started kindergarten late, so she was almost a year older than me, which is significant when you're 5. I was extremely shy, and she was able to draw me out and connect me with others. She protected me if I got teased. She was sassy and strong and very pretty and popular, and it was me that she loved the most, and that always felt special. The thing is, we grew apart as teenagers and adults and probably only spoke once or twice in the last 30 years. I attended her funeral recently after she tragically passed away at the age of 46, after losing a battle with breast cancer, leaving behind a large family. Her youngest is only in kindergarten, and it's not lost on me that we were about the same age when we first met. It occurred to me at her funeral that even as 4-year-olds, we somehow knew we needed each other. It's funny how we begin connecting to people outside the family so early on, and we make these special bonds for no other reason than we see a spark of ourselves in that other person. and we want to stoke that little fire. My other very early friendship began around the same time, a little bit later, but it's lasted throughout the years. Jessie lived down the block, a quick bike ride away, even for a little kid. I can still picture us in her front living room, singing our hearts out at the record player as the song We Are the World was blasting. We composed songs on the piano and constructed pillow forts and made doll clothes and burnt lots of Pop-Tarts in that house. She's grown up to become one of the most interesting and smartest people I know, with an incredibly successful and creative business that takes her all over the globe. She's a true gem of a friend and has definitely taught me so much about friendship and life. But even before I met either of those friends, my very first childhood friendship was developing right at home. A story about my childhood friends would not be complete without my younger brother, John. He was my trusty companion on so many imaginary journeys in our backyard and up into the trees and out on the backyard lake. So it's interesting that the person I'm interviewing today about girlfriendship happens to be someone that he introduced me to. I consider Meghan to be one of my best friends today. But long before we started hanging out in our 30s, she and John were college buddies. I'm interviewing Meghan not just because she's a close friend, but because she seems to embody this thing we call lifeiness. As an example of that, right as the interview began, she flopped out on the bed in the room where we were recording and pulled the mic to her face and stayed sprawled and comfy for the duration of the interview. But also, it was that when I first got to know her, she already had so many female friendships. This is inspiring. I had never seen such a thing in adulthood. It's so important. Meghan is also kind of a superhero. She's married with 2 young kids, has a full-time job, and she has this amazing spiritual background and a pretty good experience with positive embodiment. So today we're going to talk about girlfriendship. But we're also going to talk about how relationships, as Meghan says, are the grist for the mill of spiritual practice. So the first thing I asked Meghan, of course, is about her first female friendship, her first girlfriendship. Hi, Meghan.
Hi.
Are you comfortable, Meghan? Tell me about your very first friendship.
My first longest friendship was with a girl in my neighborhood from like 5 until now, actually. And most of the time we got along really well, but it was kind of funny because there weren't really any other girls our age in the neighborhood, which was kind of good because it forced us to like work through conflict.
Yeah.
We would get mad at each other and like one of us would like storm off home, we lived like a half a mile away from each other.
Yeah.
And then inevitably 10 minutes later, we'd like call the other one up and be like, I'm sorry. And then she'd be like, I'm sorry. I'd be like, do you want to play? I'm like, okay. And we'd like.
So you were friends since you were 5?
Mm-hmm.
That's so funny. Jessie and I have been friends since we were 5.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's a long time to be friends.
Time. Yeah, and in some ways, like obviously, your relationship with your sister is unique, but in some ways, I'm closer with her than my own sister, who's 3 years older, because, the older sisters were like the enemy back then,
Were they friends too?
Yeah, they were friends. And sometimes we'd all like play and things would be fun. But sometimes it was like little sisters against big sisters.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Big sisters always win.
They suck. Because they're always so much cooler than you. Like there's nothing to be done about it, But you just learn to live with your shame and move on.
So do you think that it was just circumstance that you guys were friends?
Absolutely.
Really? So
Absolutely.
you didn't have much in common?
No, but just like any arranged marriage, if you stick with it long enough, it tends to work out and be pretty fruitful.
That's true.
Yeah, we're alike in some ways, mostly that we lived in the same neighborhood, and not alike in some other ways. But it's funny. We've actually have a really special relationship now. We've had some ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's really cool ultimately to, have that person in your life who has known you for so long
Mm-hmm.
and luckily doesn't judge you for it.
So when you were a kid, you and your sister didn't play together?
Not willingly most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, she was 3 years older, so it was, we might play together for a little bit, but then we would end up fighting, and a lot of times it would, come to blows, or we'd be like pulling each other's hair,
Yeah.
screaming at each other. There's like enough of an age difference,
Yeah.
I feel like, to, cause turmoil. I always wanted to like borrow her clothes, and she didn't want me touching her stuff, and I deal with the same thing now with like my kids,
Yeah.
kind of a classic older sister, younger sister relationship. And then later, like in college, we became closer friends.
Yeah.
We didn't live together.
Yeah, I must have been really immature because I played with my little brother all the time. I was fine with that. And he was 3 years younger.
3 years? I thought he was only 2.
He's 3.5, almost 3.5
I think I
years
say that
younger.
every time you tell me he's
I know. He's so mature for his age.
He also came with a different dynamic because there were 4 of you. So
Yeah, we
had
were
to
the
figure out.
youngers.
That's right. So it's kind of a similar situation. in
I
a
guess
way.
so. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you have to find like your battle partner.
Yeah.
It's about
Yeah.
survival.
Well, what's funny is like my best friend, my best childhood friend, who I'm still friends with today, I always took it for granted that we were like the same person, like we were very similar.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see like you and Laura being that similar. It's just, and it's probably because like you moved away and she stayed here.
What's funny is like we're a lot more like now.
Yeah.
Ironically.
Yeah.
And we were, because I think we both just took different paths in
Mhm.
life, and now just with like a little bit of age and experience and like teeny, bit of wisdom. Yeah, and I think also luckily like we both want to like improve, like we have a little bit of, like the desire to be better people, and
Yeah.
improve to some degree. I don't know if I've made much progress, but the desire is still there. But yeah, I think before, a lot of what was going on in our heads was more influenced by adolescence or trends or
Mhm.
looking good or being thin or fit or partying or, just like all these other things. But then when you actually like have kids and you can reflect on things,
Mhm.
we have a lot more in common. And then I think just the comfort of just really knowing who each other is,
Mhm.
that's like really
Yeah,
special in and of itself.
yeah,
right? Like,
that
that's
is so
bonding.
special. Not a lot of people have that.
Yeah. It's almost like, like I say, it's almost like having another sister,
Mhm.
To some degree.
Yeah.
One thing that Laura and I have in common is that to whatever like extent we were always like not wanting to conform as much as our older sisters or something, or like had that little bit of like a attitude, or just wanting to be like a little more like wild and crazy. It's like that, it's almost the same drive that makes you want to like annoy your older sister.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's like just being like having that little bit of like difference encouraged or something. Or
Right.
just, like, going,
Yeah, like it's okay to be weird.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Weird.
Because the first one did it right. She's fine.
Right.
You can be whatever the heck you want.
Yeah. Like being a lot more comfortable with our weirdness.
That's
perhaps,
true. Yeah. You have to tell the story of how we met 30 years later.
It was a sunny day.
It
in
was-
Jacksonville Beach.
Yeah, because you were talking earlier about how you and Laura were maybe not like, I don't know, other things would kind of like get in the way, like kind of, appearance or being fit or whatever. And so I dragged you to a fitness class.
I know. I begrudgingly agreed to go to Pure Bar with
Pure
you.
Bar.
I'm not even really sure why I agreed. I think that's part of my people pleasing. And I was like, oh, well, someone invited me somewhere. I should go. Even though like every ounce of my being is kind of, actually, that's not true. I think that there's a deeper part of me that always wanted to be like a ballerina.
Yeah.
And I thought that Pure Bar was going to be more like ballet oriented. And I was like, oh, like maybe it's like adult ballet and all.
That's how they get you. They get your
Yes.
inner ballerina wannabe.
Yes, that's how it happened. And so I thought like that would be really cool. I'd always wanted to do that. I was quickly.
You're like, well, Sarah's definitely not a ballerina, but maybe she's onto something here.
And I mean, I feel like I'll try anything a couple times, but yeah, the funny thing was like I didn't know you very well, and you were a little like more reserved, and so I wasn't quite sure like what that meant, you know, and I was like, I'm not sure if she likes me or doesn't, and you know, okay, I'll try this like Pure Barre thing. I was kind of in need of some like new friends since I just like moved back to town.
Oh, thanks for taking a chance on me.
I think that's...
As an aside, Meghan was roommates with my brother in college. So we knew of each other, but we didn't know each other before this.
And maybe that's what gave you a little bit of confidence about me. You're like, if she can tolerate my brother,
yeah,
there might be something there.
Yeah. Maybe this could be a new fun.
This could be easily transferable.
I've always wanted a little sister who I could bring to ballet class.
Yeah, joke was on me.
Torture about exercise.
You're the older sister I always wanted. But yeah, no, it was like the exact opposite of like my ideal fitness class, largely due to like the special socks you had to wear and like the like mirrors on every wall. Like at that point in time, I had gotten to like a certain amount of, it was actually a good test. I'd gotten to a certain amount of like self-acceptance with just even my weight and my body image. And I'd like felt like I really came a long way. And I was like even more into yoga, but not even like the like fitness yoga. Like I was done with that kind of part of my life, like to like that desire to be like in perfect shape. And so I was like really into, you know, I was like, I just want to do stuff that feels good, you know, and like is a bit like more nourishing to the soul. And so Pure Barre was a great test to see if I'd actually like learned anything or could like stick to that. Because
so just describe the class, because I know you were late.
As always. That's my trademark.
And you had no special socks.
How did you make it on time that day? Because normally you're like...
I was trying to make a good impression on my new friend,
God.
Meghan.
That's how you wooed me. We would have been way faster friends had we both shown up late.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yes, this is my person.
But no, I had the socks on.
I come like fumbling in, like probably tripping all over myself, like didn't wear the special socks.
You got whispered at.
I got scolded by the teacher, the high-strung Pure Barre teacher. The music I really liked, but it was like the staring at yourself in the mirror, you know, while she's like yelling like, pump, pump, pump it up, pump it up.
Pump and twist and
pump
twist and
twist.
pump.
Imagine your butt getting bigger in all the right areas, or like whatever her thing was. And I was just like, oh, like I'm back in hell. Like, this is like...
I feel like the more we talk about this class, the worse and worse it gets.
It was everything I hated about fitness and like everything I'd come to like fear about my own like self-esteem issues and stuff. But yeah, like it was funny. Like at that point, like I did not want to like look at like stare at myself in a critical way, like in the mirror, right? Like I was all about just like really like just accepting, right? And not being like, my calves are too small, I need to work on my hate yourself enough to finish this round of exercises.
It's funny because I don't think it registered at all to me. It was so normal.
Oh, it's so really?
No, I mean it was kind of like a normal way to like
you're looking at me like that. You're like, what is she grimacing about? Like this?
What's wrong? I don't know. I just kind of feel like there's some instructors that are this way and some that are not.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it didn't really.
Yeah. Well, I'd been through like, you know, one too many like CrossFit sessions.
Yeah. So back to friendship. So we did become friends.
I knew we were meant to be when we're standing outside of one of the classes that we went to. And we both just started making jokes about, you know, the teacher. Yeah. Making fun of someone always tends to like unite. But it wasn't even like the teacher. It was just like the you know, the way that they were coaching the students, right? It
Yeah.
was like and push
And look at your
turn,
butt.
and squeeze your butt and squeeze your butt.
Yeah.
Just mocking that whole style felt really, really good.
Cathartic.
Really cathartic.
But then we started playing tennis.
Yes, I think that's right. We're like, well,
Yeah.
tennis is free, and we
Yeah.
both like tennis.
Yeah.
That's why we haven't played tennis.
There's no
in a while.
mirrors.
No mirrors. That's the best part
Yeah.
about doing things outside.
We should play pickleball.
I know you were telling me that it's. I know. I think I told you I've been a bit resistant just because it's all the rage. My natural instinct is to like reject the trendy thing, but then eventually I give in.
Yeah.
Because you can't swim upstream forever.
Pure Bar was pretty trendy when I convinced you, which was probably another reason you didn't want to go.
I was clearly desperate for friendship. Bye. Just love me.
So let's put together a list of things that we should tell our daughters when they're looking for friends.
Yeah. One thing that came to mind, I think one good sign, like if you're friends with someone and they can't keep your secrets,
Yeah.
even after promising, I think like
Discretion.
that's huge. Like
High levels of discretion.
yeah, choose that person wisely. But I think ultimately, like, I think that's one good sign that like someone values that trust, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have friends
Right,
that you
for
can't
sure.
trust, they probably aren't very good friends.
Well, I think the first thing that you brought up earlier was that you can tell them without judgment too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So not only will they not judge you, but they aren't going to like repeat it.
Yeah, that they're trustworthy, but like even that, like you say, you can trust them to not judge you or use it against you or make
Right.
fun of you for it or anything
Mhm.
like that. I mean, I think that's one thing that's like super special about our friendship is like
Mhm.
over the years, like I've been able to tell you like anything and everything. And surely like in the beginning there's some warming up, and you
Yeah.
test like, how does this person handle this truth about
Mhm.
me? And then over time you realize like, wow, like I really can tell this person everything. And which I shared with you, like I definitely can tell a lot of people some things,
Mhm.
right? Like even just like with your mom, you're not going to tell your mom everything. Or there's certain friends who maybe you'll tell them a lot, but like there's certain aspects that you're afraid maybe to mention because of judgment or whatnot.
Yeah.
But like, those like really good friends that you can be totally honest,
Mhm.
right? Trust them with all of your secrets. Like
Yeah.
they can see you in good and bad and ugly, totally sobbing or
Mhm.
like joyfully elated and annoying. And like there's no,
Yeah.
and they accept you like unconditionally.
Yeah. Yeah, and I used to naively think that I shouldn't have secrets from anybody. Like I should be able to share things. In order to be a free person, a liberated person, I should be able to share everything with everyone, and people should accept me.
Mm.
And of course, that's just me not being safe. not
That's just fantasy.
Not being safe. So like that's definitely it's a liberating thing. It's not so much like you want to come to a relationship with secrets and things that you like hide from the world, but sometimes you have to have boundaries and walls.
Yeah.
And you have to have somebody you can share that with. Like I think there are plenty of people out there who probably don't share their innermost secrets with anybody, which is crazy.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like funny because even hearing you say the word secrets, I can see how like immediately that does sound strange. Like, why are you keeping secrets?
What do you have secrets about? Yeah.
What are these?
But the truth is, like, a lot of, like, there are, I don't know, the world doesn't want to hear many of our secrets, right? Like, or shouldn't, there are things that you can only trust with some people, and that's okay.
Right.
That's what friendships are about.
Yeah. And I guess, typically our secrets aren't necessarily like scandalous. We may have had one or two. But normally it is like those
We
things.
won't say. On a scale of 1 to 10.
It will go down.
We won't talk about how scandalous.
No scandals here. But no, it is more of like those inner secrets.
Yeah.
that it's like you're just afraid to share, or you feel
Or like, no one wants to hear this anyway.
Or things that you're ashamed of. Maybe it's even like those types of secrets that like you keep them in because you don't want to tarnish anyone's view of you.
Right.
But when you have a friend who like kind of little by little has shown you that like there's nothing you can do.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It's like, yeah, it is like a pretty like unconditional, like it feels pretty unconditional. I mean, I'm sure there's things I could do to you that make you like.
Yeah. I just think of it as a liberating feeling because you are safe and free inside of a relationship, meaning you're secure because you're in a friendship, right?
Yeah, it's almost
but
like
you're free.
It feels more freeing, right?
Yeah.
It's like those friendships that feel less of like a trap or an obligation,
right?
And more of like this freeing experience. Like when you with them, or when you're with them and you talk to them, you feel even more free,
right?
Afterward, because there's definitely like those friendships that feel heavy and
or where people hold grudges. I think that would be number 2 for me. Like, I don't want to be in a friendship where people hold grudges.
Totally.
Because, or who won't say things out loud.
Yes.
And then hold that grudge.
Yeah.
To me, that feels very unsafe because it's like, well, sometimes I might not know I did something, you know?
Yeah, that's the worst.
Or like, you know, if like me and you, and I do respect time. I honestly do. Like, I will show up if I need to. Maybe not time. I respect people, but I feel like I'm not going to lose you as a friend, and you're not going to lose me as a friend if like, you know, you show up late. It's not something I'm going to hold on to or think about, you know?
Yeah. Actually, I was just thinking about a friendship that I lost because of a time thing.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean,
they're lost.
Yeah. Which is fine, but it's kind of a similar thing. I think everyone has like their make or break thing.
Yeah.
So certain people that probably feel like you don't respect their time, you don't respect them, and that's fine. Right. Obviously. Right. I'm not meant to be friends with those people.
To a certain degree, I feel that way. I do, you know, but I'm not going to jeopardize like a really important friendship over it, you know? Like, if I have to, I'll have like a serious conversation about something like that, you know, whether it's time or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I think because we're both, I call it time optimists, like we also give each other a lot of grace.
Yes,
you know, I think if we were friends and one of us wasn't, that would be harder. And we probably would have had conversations about like, you were an hour late, Sarah.
Yeah.
You told me you'd be here.
Well, I'm like really careful to show up on time when I meet Jessie because she is always on time. Always, you know?
That is so funny.
So I try to be more careful. And I'm not saying I'm not careful with you.
But that is so funny. I didn't know you could be on time consistently.
Well, I mean, it's not that consistent. But the thing about her is that she'll show up
even
places
earlier.
15 minutes early.
Yeah. That puts
and I consistently show up 15 minutes late. So I try.
That's good.
So I always try to be there on time or within the 10 minutes.
The 10-minute grace period. That's so funny.
I probably think about it more. Like, you know, like I worry about it more.
Yeah. Well, one thing it makes me think about, I think it was Adyashanti one time talk about this concept of, you know, like, for instance, let's say you make plans with a friend and then they tell you a couple nights later, like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to cancel. Like, they tell you that they're going to do this other thing. Or maybe they just cancel and they don't tell you, but you find out that they did something else. And you feel like, oh, like, what the hell? Like, you canceled on me to go do this other thing. It makes you like mad at them.
Right.
You know? But this concept was basically like, if they're your friend and you care about them, like, why wouldn't you want them to have like the funnest time possible? Like, if it's not with you, fine, who cares?
Right.
Like, you should be saying, you know, like to people you love, like, yeah, great. Like, if you could have a better time than with me, like, go for it.
Right.
Like, I encourage that. Like, have fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even if it's not with me.
Like, just the example of the musical last week.
Oh, right.
That, I think if we weren't as good friends, you probably wouldn't feel comfortable being like, you know what? I actually really want to meet, you know, I want to meet your new guy. but I don't really like musicals. And that totally makes sense to me. And like, it also really makes sense to me that you wouldn't want to waste a date night on a musical if you don't like musicals. It's like, first of all, I know what it's like to waste a date night. And second of all, like, and I also know you, and I'm like, yeah, I can't even imagine Meghan sitting through a 2.5-hour musical. I can see her doing it.
Joking when I invited her in the first place.
I can see her doing it just to meet him, and that's so sweet. But I'll let her go on this one.
Well, it was cool because I felt comfortable.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't want not show up because I'm a big believer in like not flaking whenever possible, you know? Like, I mean, sometimes you just don't feel it and you just have to call it, right? But like, it's the most annoying thing to be friends with someone who flakes all the time. Yeah. Typically, like, those relationships don't normally like work out with me because it's just...
I just kind of like fall out. Like I easily just kind of like...
I see the pattern here.
Yeah. You don't want to go to my musicals with me. You guys hate music. No. But what's funny about that Adashanti thing is that I can see some people feeling like they don't have close enough connections to friends to feel they might not have an experience with an authentic friendship, or that many authentic friendships. And like counting, their friends around them or looking at their friends around them, they think, well, no, the value of having that friend is that they're going to spend time with me and they're going to, make my evening more, kind of like a transactional relationship. Yeah. And I feel like that's how I used to think of a lot of relationships, that, well, I don't really get anything else out of this except for we're just standing next to each other at a party. Right. There's someone standing next to me.
Well, I think friendships, just like any relationships, we were really poorly educated on, even from the beginning. And if like I think back to my early friendships, there's always this like territorial thing. So it's like, well, she's my friend, or she's not your friend, or like you don't like, the friends that your friends don't like, and and you do like the friends, hopefully, in most cases that your friends do like, but there's all kind of these weird unspoken rules, right? But ultimately, just like in any relationships, I feel like I want to be around those people that make me feel the least judged, make me feel the freest, right? It's like if you always feel like there's a transaction or there's a catch, then it makes that relationship more burdensome or more weighty, or you have to worry about it more. And, and sometimes I struggle with that concept. Like I like that concept, but there's definitely been times where, like I hear about a friend doing something when they could have been doing something with me, every once in a while, or maybe I think, well, why didn't I get invited to that, or like whatever. Yeah. Right. But then practicing, almost being part of like a spiritual practice, like, you know what, like I love her. If that's what she wants to do, if she wants to hang out with those bitches and not me, then great. Like, have a great time. And I'll see you when you get sick of them and I'm just kidding.
And with much grace.
Right. But it's a struggle because, at first you feel like, oh, like they don't like me as much, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not cool enough, or like whatever that weirdness is, the shame or doubt or whatnot. But at the end, if you can like, just kind of reiterate that mantra, like, you know what? Awesome. Like, I hope you have an amazing time because I love you and I want you to have like the most fun possible in this life, whether that's like with me or without me. Like, that's what I want for you. Yeah. And then just like let it go, like set that bird free. And if they love you, they'll go. Right. Yeah. But it is hard sometimes. Sometimes it's easier. You're like, oh, whatever. Like, she can do whatever she wants to do. And other times it's like, oh.
Yeah. I feel like you were on a spiritual path for a long time. Like, you have been a spiritual person for a long time. How has it changed your friendship? Have you, like, over the years become a better friend because of it?
I think I've always been really loyal. I think that's something that, like, for whatever reason, I think especially, like, my dad was a really loyal person. And for some reason, I just really admired that. And my mom's really, really loyal too, probably much more so than my dad now that I have some like perspective on my childhood. But so that's been something that's always been really important. I think I've always provided that. But I think the more, you really look at like your everyday life becoming your spiritual practice, you quickly learn that like relationships, oh my God, like that's where like the meat is, I mean, you can be, as lightened as you, think you are, but really I feel like the grist for the mill is typically relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can't kind of start working on that without it affecting, like all kinds of personal relationships or work relationships or your, marriage or any of those types of things. But ultimately, I feel like if you are really interested in working on yourself and becoming more in touch, at some point you look at what is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And there, another like analogy I thought was so interesting that I'd heard was like, if you just saw a person on the street, just like walking down the street, you wouldn't care what he did. You give him all the freedom in the world. You wouldn't care if he just started taking off his clothes. You'd just be like, oh wow, that dude's like getting naked. Like who cares, right? But if that was like your best friend or like your husband and they were with you out in public and started taking off their clothes, like you would be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, it's so crazy. But ultimately, we typically give those that are closest to us far less freedom.
Yeah.
Than any random stranger. And that was one thing.
You're like, well,
really
what are you doing
to
us? You're doing something to me. Yeah. When you're doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's what I really started to look at. It's like, hey, like I want freedom.
Yeah.
Right. It's part of like the spiritual growth. It's like, you want to feel more free. You want to feel more love. You want to feel all these things. But how much are you offering this to the people who you care about most? Right. Typically we, handcuff the people that we love. We tell people what they can and can't do when they're with us, or, whether it's our parents or their kids, we don't like certain things they say. We don't want them to act certain ways, right? Where there's a lot of attachment. There's a lot of things that we take personally because it reflects on our, our own egos or whatnot, right? But so what are the little things that we can start doing to give people more space, right? Still letting them know we care and love them, right? But also like giving them the freedom, because if you want freedom, you have to be willing to give it to other people. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I feel like that's something that you're constantly learning. You're learning that with a spouse. You're learning that with your kids at different stages of their lives. It's like figuring out how to hold a container for them, like hold space for them and be there for them and be loyal, but also give them freedom.
Yeah. And I think like real truths are typically a paradox in that way, right? And it's like, yes, you have to, hold them, but you also have to let them go. You have to find like where those two meet, find the balance. Or like you said, like what does that container look like? And it's different for potentially every relationship too, right? But I ultimately think relationships and the knowledge about how to have good relationships are, wasn't taught to me. It typically is just modeled in your life, or you pick up on it from friends or other family members or whatnot. And then, at a certain point for me, it was like in my early 30s, it dawned on me. I was like, oh my gosh, like no one has ever taught me these things. I'm on my own. Yeah. I've got to figure this out, how to have better relationships.
Right.
And so, like, golly, I think back so many years, I mean, just little principles, had they been taught to me when I was much younger, like how would that have changed so much of my experience in my relationships growing up? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think most of these things are just like so much of life. It's on your like default program. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Unless someone specifically teaches you about it, just like money, just like nutrition, just like all of these things, unfortunately.
But you're evolving and you're teaching them. I mean,
trying.
I mean, there are some parents, like I feel like my parents didn't have time for that,
That's true.
I mean, maybe they did. I'm sure that my mom did some evolving and changing and growing, and she became who she was. And, passed that down. And that was certainly much more evolved than her mother, probably. But at the same time, like, there doesn't have to be a ceiling to it. You can keep growing as a person, as a mother. And sometimes other people around you, like your family or your spouse, might kind of like want you to keep it under wraps. But like, you're just going to keep evolving, and you can, like you don't have to stop because you're a certain age. Yeah. And you can keep on handing it down to your kids. So what are we going to hand down to our daughters? Like if we were to give our daughters a list of things for what to look out for, I would love to tell her, like have a conversation with her now, like in the future when you make, your real adult, female friends, which probably looks like one thing from a kid's perspective.
Yeah.
Like, oh, these ladies are friends, you know, it looks like
Yeah.
a certain thing. You can easily kind of have low expectations, you know,
Yeah,
for that. But they
totally.
can be the most gratifying thing in the world. Like, to me, siblings and friends, you know, friends,
Mhm.
that's what's going to like kind of help us make
Keep
it
you in the
through.
game.
Keep you in the game for life. So what are we have discretion.
Yeah.
I love that that's the first one. Keeping our secrets.
First and foremost.
Second of all, do not judge me. No judgment.
But you know, if you think about like what you were
Unconditional
saying,
love.
yeah, like that all kind of falls into like the container metaphor with your friend,
Yeah.
right? That discretion is part of holding that container.
Yeah,
for them, right?
It
You
is.
want someone who has a container with no holes. You know, trust, love.
Yeah, authenticity.
Yeah, authenticity.
Yeah.
And someone who you can be like ridiculous with.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
And weird and wacky.
Yeah.
You know, like someone who you can, you know, take those risks and
Yeah.
say those jokes that you think are maybe like kind of borderline. Because I feel like frequently, I feel like I'm always testing that boundary with you. I'm
Hmm.
like more and more kind of pushing that
Mhm.
envelope. Like, can I surprise Sarah today with a ridiculous like,
Yeah.
comment or joke? And when I get that laugh from you, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, my soul has been fulfilled. I
Aw.
will live another day.
Well, I think that goes in my top 5 is an easy laugher.
Yeah, easy laugh.
You're a great laugher.
Oh, thanks.
I love how you laugh so easily.
The easy laugher. Yeah. Well, I think I told you I learned that from one of my favorite easy laughing friends. Who
Yeah.
still am friends with, but she's in Seattle. And we would be out in public and she would laugh so loud. And it was like shocking.
Mhm.
Like I would look around like, oh my God, Lori, like you are like, that's really loud. But I would never say that because she was just having so much fun. Like she would laugh so loud and be
Aw.
enjoying herself so much.
Mhm.
And I like just really started to love it. I was like,
Mhm.
she doesn't care how loud she laughs.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
to be able to be, you know, like just let it go. Just
Yeah.
like laugh as loud as you want because you're enjoying your life in that moment.
Right.
You know, to have
right.
to hold back on a laugh.
Liberating the voice is a huge thing and a long journey. So
So
like
on the
liberating the laugh.
Liberate the laugh. Yeah. And so the more I like took to just like letting myself laugh as loud as Lori laughed. Of course, when you're with someone who laughs loud, you know, it kind of gives your permission.
Mhm.
But then I just kind of like took it on.
Mhm.
It's like, this is awesome,
Yeah.
you know? And then it's also like, it's a good test too. Like, can you just, you know, let yourself laugh freely, regardless of what what judgment there might be,
Mhm.
you know, like another kind of spiritual practice, right?
Yeah, I think all of this is like basically, can I take my mask off? Like, can I
Mhm.
make a mistake
Yeah,
and be
there you go.
late and be loved still?
Mm-hmm.
Can I tell something that I'm ashamed of and still be loved? Can I be loud and annoying and still be loved?
Yeah.
Can I not wear makeup and still be loved? Like all of those
Yeah.
things, like, can I take the mask off?
Right. Not wear the perfect outfit.
Right.
Like-
Yeah.
Still.
And that seems like, I mean, that's a recipe for any good relationship.
Mm-hmm. People who will call an ambulance for you if you're in need.
And pick you up from the hospital in
Pick you up from
Palatka.
the hospital far, far away. I mean, that was a low moment when you were really there for me. That was like,
I remember when I almost lost you in Publix
oh
because I was looking for an anti-nausea medicine.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, just stay here.
And I didn't do what you
And
did.
you didn't do. And I give you that freedom to not do what I tell you to do.
Megan, I told you to
And
stay.
there was a pile of vomit outside of the car.
That was a low moment.
I was like following the vomit.
That's a trail. But, you know, when you have that special someone who can walk you through it,
Yeah.
just really listen and, yeah, like totally. Because it is like there are moments in life that are absolutely humiliating,
Yeah.
you know? And when you can share that with someone,
Yeah.
that's powerful.
Yeah.
We can do anything.
We can do anything. All right. Thanks for listening to our conversation today about friendship. So, yeah, when you're thinking about friendship, trustworthiness, and allowing your friend freedom, but being loyal, these are all good things. Laughing easily, that's a good one. And we didn't go into the story, but Megan had an incident where I had to pick her up from the hospital. Everything worked out, everything was fine. But yeah, that's a good one. When the occasion calls for it, call an ambulance or show up at the hospital. Seriously, show up at the hospital. No one wants to be at the hospital alone. But thanks for listening today. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Book of Lifeiness, and I will see you next time.